I still remember when I first discovered Panzer Paladin. It was 2 years ago at PAX East, and I was searching for interesting indies when I came across its booth. There was no line, seemingly no real interest, but I gave it a shot and was pleasantly surprised. I'd kept my eye on it ever since, hopeful that this could be the next great indie action platformer. But now that it's been released, has it met that expectation? Well, let's take a look. Panzer Paladin doesn't really bother with a story. You're immediately tossed into the opening stage with little context. It's just a mech that can equip different melee weapons and the pilot that sometimes has to go it alone. But after that opening stage, the premise begins to take shape. Mysterious weapons are landing all over the Earth, serving as beacons for an endless stream of monsters to pour through. As a rescue android, Flame, and her mech partner, Grit, it's up to you to defeat the monsters around the world before taking the fight directly to the invaders. It's all kept extremely simple and seems like an afterthought for most of the game. There are supporting characters, but you never learn anything about them. Flame herself is spunky with a fun design, but that's about it. There is a bit more to this plot toward the end, but I didn't feel any real connection by that point. Panzer Paladin is all about the action. Anything else is mere window dressing. Thankfully, that action is just as accessible and fun as the first time I played it. The main conceit is that Grit is able to wield any weapon dropped by the invading monsters. This includes variations on swords, spears, and clubs, including sillier fare like baseball bats, frying pans, and lead pipes. But Grit can't use these weapons forever. Each one has a certain amount of durability that drains with each successful hit and will break eventually. But it's also possible to break weapons earlier either by throwing them for a stronger hit or intentionally breaking them to unleash a magical spell. These spells can range from healing Grit, granting it a short buff to its attack or defense, and allowing weapons to shoot a beam to hit far-off enemies. There are around a dozen spells that can be cast, and I often had to weigh my options on when to use them. Grit can only wield 4 weapons at a time, though he can swap between them on the fly. Any extras enter the inventory and have to be manually equipped if you want to bring them out. Otherwise, you'll be fighting with your fist, which is still viable, but lacking in utility. It all seems like a great system that balances strategy with your inventory of weapons, but I never really had to think too hard. I'd let a weapon almost break and then use its spell, ensuring I always had plenty of backups. But even then, I didn't really need to be that conservative, as enemies drop new weapons constantly. There are good ideas at play here, but it seems easy to break and just makes the game easier. The weapons are even used as a kind of currency, allowing the player to trade in a certain amount in exchange for a permanent health increase. But I was maxed out after just 6 levels in my playthrough. I never really had to debate with myself if the weapons were worth keeping or not. Otherwise, Grit is surprisingly nimble despite being a mech with a well-paced gait and backwards dodge. Even more useful are its upward and downward strikes. The upward attack is essentially a double jump, allowing players to reach higher platforms or out-of-reach enemies. Meanwhile, the downward strike is another example of the Scrooge McDuck method, allowing Grit to bounce across enemies. It's effective against smaller monsters, but then there are those with shields which can block most attacks. These are probably the most fun to fight, as it feels a bit like Zelda 2. Grit has a shield of its own which blocks most attacks as long as it's at the correct height. Battles with these monsters become a duel, and learning their patterns makes them so much more manageable. If you can pull off a parry where you attack just the enemy hits your shield, you'll not only break their defense, but possibly disarm them. Combat is at its most satisfying in these moments. It's also possible for Flame to eject from Grit at any time, allowing her to use her whip to access smaller areas, reach recharge stations for Grit's health, and use her whip to swing across gaps. I really enjoyed playing her in these moments, as they required me to take my time. Flame can handle most monsters pretty well, but she doesn't have a lot of health. If Grit is taken down, Flame is forcibly ejected and must work through the rest of the level on her own until she finds health for the mech. I died more often than not, though there were 2 bosses that I was able to defeat with Flame alone, which felt really good. I just wish Flame got the spotlight more, or the game played with this switching aspect. There were a few moments like needing to eject to dodge a massive boss attack, but it was a rare occasion. However, the biggest problem is that, overall, there's not a lot of challenge to Panzer Paladin. As I've said, weapons are abundant, but few enemies ever gave me much trouble beyond the ones with shields, despite a new one being unique to each stage. It didn't help that the platforming rarely required much thought, allowing me to simply barrel through most of the game. Not only that, but the game features a Mega Man-esque design where the initial levels can be chosen in any order. But unlike that game, there's not really a benefit to choosing one over the other. Sure, you get the boss's weapon, but it's never integral or even especially helpful compared to other drops. They're just unique with a bit more durability, but they will break. Because of this structure, over half the game feels unambitious. Each level is different with fantastic backgrounds to emphasize that part of the world, but the difficulty never increases until the final set of levels, and that's where it comes alive with better challenges and platforming. I feel like the game would have been better served if it were more linear. That said, there aren't any major problems in Panzer Paladin. The bosses are fun, the pixel style is great, especially in the few cutscenes, and the music is fantastic the entire way through. There are even extra modes such as the ability to craft your own weapon and share it online, a boss rush mode that focuses more on points than surviving, a speedrun mode to see how fast you can finish a level, and New Game Plus where you keep all your weapons and the levels are remixed to be a bit more challenging. That said, I tried this on hard mode and still had no issues. Panzer Paladin is still a good idea and can be a lot of fun, but many of its systems don't seem to mesh well as it takes most of the challenge away. And I think a 2D action platformer needs some teeth. That's not to say it should be downright unfair and aggravating, I mean it should feel like it's constantly ramping up, and the structure prevents that until the final third of the adventure. I still absolutely like the game and feel it could be a good entry point for those new to the genre, but veterans could come away underwhelmed. I do hope a sequel is made because this idea still has a ton of potential. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to GameXplain for more on indies and other things gaming.